In this episode of Inside Out, a yoga therapy podcast, our guest shares their personal experience with the use of ayahuasca, including the severe mental health challenges they faced as a result. As yoga therapists, we want to make it clear that we do not recommend or endorse the use of any substances for the symptom management of any health condition. In this time we shared with Robbie, we approached this conversation with compassion, curiosity, and without judgment. Discussions around substance use or mental health struggles are sensitive topics for you. Please listen with care or consider skipping this episode. All right, so welcome to another episode of Inside Out, a yoga therapy podcast. And today we're very fortunate to have another lovely guest, which is Robbie Fulston. Is that the right way to pronounce it, yeah. Robbie? Just like to make sure. So Robbie is a student of mine, or has been a client of mine for quite a while. Now, Robbie describes himself, and we have like a theatre background in common, but Robbie describes himself as a playmaker, a facilitator, and a fool in training.
Fool in training, yeah.
Which I'm going to let you talk about in more detail. But we're really, really happy to have you here today, Robbie, and to hear your story and to hear how yoga therapy has supported you in challenging times and good times. Mm-hmm. So, first of all, thank you for coming over from Leeds. We do appreciate it. Welcome to Oldham.
Thank you.
And first of all, would you like to just maybe introduce yourself, in more detail? Because I just gave that intro, but I don't feel it was enough of a fanfare.
Do you want me to explain fool in training? Is that the always in
I
training?
Would like you to, yeah.
So my background is in theatre. I studied theatre and performance at uni. And the things I got out of that was the liveness about it. I remember I kind of got into my third year and was like, I like a lot of different kinds of theatre. It's not that it's just, musicals or it's just really out there like performance or whatever, but like there's certain elements of all of it and there's certain performances that I like more, but it's not because of the genre or whatever. And it was kind of something about like playfulness and that kind of thing. So then I got into studying like clowning and fooling and that kind of thing after that. And the fool thing is, it's the idea like the fool in the tarot card or the fool as an archetype is like about trust. And I would say the fool is like the yogi. So It's this path of like, it's very much the spiritual path. It's the path of trusting and like trusting, not necessarily trusting that everything will go great, but just trusting that like somewhere deep down it's kind of all part of, it's all meant to happen, or it's all, without getting too woo about it, but it's all at least part of life. Yeah. And I think that was kind of after I'd kind of come to yoga. I'd started being interested in the spiritual stuff a bit first and then sort of studied theatre and then was like, oh, what's gonna, how do they like mix together or what's this quality, that I think a lot of people look for when they come to yoga and that kind of thing. There's something in there, I don't know quite what it is, the brain tries to work it out. It's like there's something in there that certain people have or certain elements.
So, I think we'll start at the beginning, and then we'll kind of see where it goes. So the first thing I'd like to ask you is, how did yoga enter your life, and then where did it take you?
Because you kind of just asked me a little bit to like think about that before we did it, and I was like, when was the first time I did it? And luckily my dad had come to one of your classes today, and I asked him about it because I think he introduced me to certainly to yoga in terms of as a movement practice first. I think it was whilst I was at uni. My parents were always quite open-minded about stuff. My mum was a nurse, but like got into reflexology and that kind of thing. So there's been a bit of she went to homeopathy treatments a lot. So there was a bit of like alternative, therapies or alternative holistic therapies sort of around. I was like aware of them. But yeah, when I checked with Dad, he was like, I think it was whilst I was at uni and he was going to a class, although it was quite a like strict Iyengar class at the time. Doing postures and whatever. And I think I was just like, I'd always been quite like when I was younger, like a child that was like quite searching in like quite a big way for stuff. I used to get quite scared about like the meaning of life and the universe. Quite big thoughts was always quite a big source of anxiety for me.
Yeah.
And I think starting to come into this world, I think a lot of people, it's what, you know, can bring them to it. Either it's like a physical thing or they're searching for something. You know, we all go, oh, there's something about life that I'm just trying to work out on it. Didn't quite get it from school or whatever. And I think starting to learn a bit about, and certainly when I met you, was a lot more about the like everyday teachings of it and the kind of like grounded stuff about it. So it all kind of, started coming from there, really.
Yeah. Sophie, anything you'd like to ask about the yoga path?
Well, I was just thinking that, a lot of people do have big thoughts when they're younger and they're really sometimes we're looking for a mentor, aren't we? And what you get in the stereotypical primary school teaching, it sounded like you didn't have anybody to turn to with those thoughts and those feelings. And is that something that then, how did you go from being at university doing a strict Iyengar class to then coming across Jane's yoga?
So it was, I only did like a couple when I came back from uni, sort of in the breaks every time. So I'd kind of gone to it and went, oh, well, my body, like this is great for my body, but I need something else. And then I think it was Dad again, like he'd come over to, you know, him and his partner knew you from being, his partner was in Manchester.
That's right.
I think they'd met you through that.
Yeah.
And then I came on the a retreat to India that Jane was running. And that was just after I'd graduated.
Go for the big thing.
Well, if we're going to talk any more about my spiritual journey, you know, part of the Fool's thing is on the tarot card, he like leaps off a cliff, like in trust. And I've kind of quite
like
a lot of that.
You?
I had a therapy session once where she went, is there any other way down to the sea? And I was like, oh, you can maybe float gently down the river. But like, the metaphor is of trust that something might catch you. And I think there's sometimes where I've just kind of crashed straight into the ocean.
Yeah.
But not to be recommended, but it's one way of doing it.
But you didn't crash into the ocean in India, did you?
No. That was it's kind of funny that I kind of went a bit off more onto that afterwards, because like meeting you, it was very obvious that it was a very like grounded kind of practice and a lot of like warmth and humor. And I'd just come out of uni. It was just after I'd graduated, and was kind of searching a bit. And my final project at uni had been about a play space, making a play space for adults to be in. And it wasn't really like, it wasn't a show or anything. We literally just set up a room with a sandpit, like a bit like a nursery, based on research about kind of playfulness and improvisation and that kind of thing. But we had adults, some of my teachers from uni came out of there like crying. And they were like, oh, I haven't held a paintbrush like that in however long, or I haven't, you know, done that kind of thing. And it tapped into like certainly a younger part of people, I think, but also there was something about being in the moment. And we did a lot of work about sensory stuff from that kind of thing. And then two things sort of happened in parallel quite soon after leaving. And I had a lot of anxiety at uni, was having panic attacks, that kind of thing. And left still with quite a lot of big questions, and then also the added thing of doing an arts degree and coming out thinking, oh, how am I going to make a career out of this or whatever. And one was meeting Jane, and then I'd also met another mentor, Holly, who does like clown therapy, like clown performance training, but she's a drama therapist. And I was saying to this, Jane, there's something about people that have done a bit of therapy grounding that it really creates quite a safe space, whatever they're doing, whether it's like theatre stuff or whether it's teaching yoga. It adds a certain layer of being able to hold that space and like meet different needs that aren't necessarily just, oh, you know, I've got a bit of a problem bending my leg, but might be the emotions that come along with it and the stuff that, like you say, that people come with, the questions that people come with, all the issues that people come with to that.
Yeah, and I think we've spoken a lot about this, Jane, haven't we, that on that particular thought track, that people who are searching with big ideas, the meaning of life, the meaning of the universe, what does it mean for them to be a human being, can often, not always, but be coming from that place of, I actually feel really anxious about this. And one of Jane's phrases that you've just used there is, having a container for that is so supportive. And what we can see in the yoga landscape is that sometimes that can be actually encouraged in a negative way and in a harmful way. And the flip side of that is when you find a mentor who goes, okay, so you're out there, everything's feeling really big and really overwhelming and really anxious, And you use that word of actually finding a practice that's really grounding, very centering, can give those big emotions and big thoughts that safe container to be like, oh, actually, rather than, you know what I mean when I say almost like fanning the flames of it.
Exactly, because a lot of practices are doing that, aren't they? I mean, they, without meaning to, they're actually putting you in a position. We talked about it today about, we were talking about trauma-informed holding of space by these gurus. They don't, and all it does is create more anxiety, more of the things that you don't, that you find difficult.
I think because yoga's has a spiritual element to it, and it doesn't have to for people, and it's obviously there's a lot of brilliant work going on well, this is just psychology that before it was known as that and before it was studied as that, people were intuiting this kind of thing, but because it does have that element where spirituality is involved, and I've certainly kind of gone down that path in various ways. You can try and bypass stuff, that thing of like transcending, sort of getting high. I have a thing that I say to friends of like, there's a, people say about, getting high, I'd love to go and, and it was like drugs at a festival, get really high. Like no one goes, I need to get really scented, man. But that's really, exactly. I do think that's what we're looking for. And
definitely.
But when you're in that anxious place in your like late teens, early 20s, and especially if you have had quite severe mental health stuff or like really anxious, I think often I can only really talk from my experience, was like, I need to feel really good. Like I need to feel the opposite of that, and actually feeling calm and centered, even though that is actually that place of kind of spaciousness and like gentleness. It's not very like fun, is it? It's not very bright and shiny against like the modern world with all its like
trinkets,
and advertising and all that kind of stuff. And it's loud. The world is loud, and I think it can be quite easy to go, I've got to get away from it all or up. And certainly in Jane's practice and in what it seems to me that like the purest forms of yoga is about, being like coming back to that stillness.
So on this, we kind of moved in the direction of mental health. And obviously I've known you for quite a long time, and I know that you've had some challenging times. Yeah. Would you like to talk about that or explain to us what? I know you would.
Don't need to like get it all out there.
No,
I've got people that I talk to, but in terms of the story of it,
it'd be really interesting, I think.
Well, I remember, I was very anxious at uni. I had what I called panic attacks, but they were kind of more like seizures, like non-epileptic kind of functional seizures. So I'd just get very overwhelmed and like fall on the floor and like have what would look like a fit, but wasn't, what didn't lose consciousness and that kind of thing. And which was weird. And I didn't really get it checked out at the time. That was just, people say, I was just in a situation and it kind of feels normal for me. And I was like, it's just obviously the way I respond to anxiety. And looking back, probably it would have been good if someone around me had gone, that's quite extreme. Like normally sometimes people feel like they're having a heart attack, but actually sort of like being on the floor and sort of writhing around a bit isn't the best thing. And, there were lots of anxiety things about that, but that was the main kind of physical thing that had happened to me. And then it had kind of calmed down a bit when the kind of stress of essays and that kind of thing at uni left. But I remember when I came to see you and we went to India, so we'd done 2 weeks, we'd come into Delhi, which is very sensorily overwhelming as a city, and a completely different kind of pace of life and way of life to being in the UK. We'd gone away to the mountains for 2 weeks. That was really lovely. I have some great, have you talked about Bhavas on the show? About Jane. A little bit. Jane kind of has the thing of bringing a sense, like bringing a feeling with any kind of mantra that you do or whatever, but bringing that, like recalling a feeling, and it can be from a memory. And like the sun rising over the mountains sort of in the Himalayas is absolutely one of mine that I still go to, because it was just very magical and a bit like the Lion King in real life and all that kind of thing. So that was really beautiful, very calming, very relaxing. I was like, it's quite simple. It wasn't too big, but it just felt very right and very holding and very comfortable. But I remember it was like 2 weeks, wasn't it? And then I was staying on an extra 2 weeks on my own. And I was like, 21, 22. And I remember my dad and his partner had gone on this thing too. And you were all leaving. Yeah. And the night that I was, before I went, I was like a little boy that was being left in India on
We
his
had
own
quite a few
again.
conversations because we helped you to get I think Piers helped you to get the train.
Yeah.
Tried to get everything set up, didn't we, before you went? But it was still quite a big deal, wasn't it?
It was, and I think there was that there was a bit of shame wrapped around in it as well, which I was since then always kind of convincing of going, oh, I'm in my 20s now, and like, you know, still had a bit of that maybe being like, you know, I'm a man, or I've left uni, whatever it was, you know, I'm a young man, whether it's to do with gender or whether it's just to do with like I'm out of uni, you know, I've done theatre, I should be really confident, I should be this, I should be that. And like, I really, you know, I wasn't. And I remember there was lots of kind of like auntie and mum type characters who kept like knocking on my door that night being like, are you okay? And I just didn't really sleep. And then what actually ended up happening is I got on the train the next day and was fine and dealt with it and met an American man who was from Florida and looked a bit like Jesus, and we had a great, like, you know, and went and just spent a couple of weeks there. But like, even then there was that kind of like, there was something kind of some deep like anxiety in me. And I think I spent a lot of my 20s, yes, searching. It was kind of searching, and that in a way, that classic kind of spiritual journey of kind of what is it? And I don't know exactly where it came from, but when you were saying about primary school doing it, I do have a very specific memory that someone came with like a dome and taught about like the night sky and had like the constellations in it.
Wow.
And I must have been like 6 or 7. And then he just casually went, and like in a few billion years, the sun's going to explode. And that's fine. And there we go. And that's fine. And I do think it was that simple. Something like that as a kid, you just go, whoa, you know, or someone had asked about it and the universe, and like just drop that bombshell.
And no follow-up questions,
you know,
children. Bye-bye. I'll take my 30 pounds.
And like, I remember just feeling this cold. And then I would have these attacks like when I was younger, before the normal stress of uni, where I'd just run around the house going, oh my God, and like the survival instinct going, well, you can't do anything about that. You know, my amygdala was like, oh, like, I'm not sure there's a lot that I can do against kind of like the end of the universe or that kind of thing. And it was massive. And a part of me is like, should I even mention that? Because some other people might go, oh my God, I've never thought about that. But yeah, I've certainly like been on a journey to be like, oh, well, maybe it'll be fine, maybe not now, or like at least accepting it a bit more. So I think there was a lot of that was driving stuff. And then the kind of, I say usual, in my experience, the usual thing, there's a lady called Gwen Gordon who does playfulness stuff in America, and she calls it, let me get this right, WBNE radio, which is the voice in your head that goes wrong, bad, and not enough.
Ooh.
Oh, brilliant.
Welcome to WBNE radio. You're wrong, you're bad, and you're not enough.
I love it.
Yeah, and there was loads of that about, you know, doing theatre and were people more creative than me, and just being anxious and that kind of thing. And yeah, I don't think it was anyone's fault. Like, you know, I don't blame anyone for that now, but I just think there's so many certainly kids as well, like, and I've been in most recently kind of been working in childcare, and like the teachers are great, they're really well meaning, but just in terms of the system, there's no space and there's no time really to deal with those emotions. And unless you've got a really good either teacher or deputy head that's really into that kind of thing, and or which, you know, we do at the school that I'm currently at, and or, you know, people that are still in some kind of community village, like a neighbour or really good grandparents that are doing stuff, there's not a lot of space for kids to still, I think, to like feel that kind of thing. And when it's something massive like that, and you're worried that it's so terrifying that the adults might be really scared about that kind of thing, you know, and I'm sure that was my flavour of that and my version of that. But, you know, I know it can happen with a variety of different things with kids. And then, so it had that kind of searching that kicked off this whole thing of like, I need to feel safe enough, like in me. I think. Yeah.
I think that existential thing, I think that happened to me when I was about 7, but it wasn't quite as dramatic as that. I was, like you, a very sensitive child.
Just the drama, the theatre drama.
But the theatre and the sensitivity. But, you know, I remember just one day, and I don't know, maybe everybody gets this, because I know my nephew spoke to me about it when he was about 10. And I just was outside, and I could hear the birds, and I was in the garden, and I was looking at the trees, and suddenly I just had this thing, one day I won't be here to see this. And it was really overwhelming. And I was crying. I remember going in and saying to my mum, one day I won't be able to see this, Mummy, will I? And it really was very real. And when my nephew had it, I was able to say, yeah, I had that, when I think we all do, when we realise the enormity of what being alive is, but we don't have perhaps anything in our lives to help us to make sense of that. Because maybe that's why people had religion or, different sort of belief systems. If that's not something that's very certain, like my parents were agnostics, and they just said, oh, you just, go out there and if you believe in it, you believe in it, whatever. So, there was no certainty. And I think that uncertainty is quite scary, isn't it, when you're small?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I'm not an expert in like all children or that kind of thing, but I hear stories about people either having something like that or having a slightly unexplained spiritual or like other kind of experience that they can't explain. I think a lot of people kind of call it like that. And, again, it's not anyone's fault, but as a culture and a society, we don't necessarily always have an adult around for every kid that has the tools and the capacity to want to hold that and to dissect it a bit or explore it with them, I guess, necessarily.
Yeah.
Because of it not being, and it's not necessarily about needing therefore to be religious or that yoga needs to be that, but for me on the journey I've been on, it's more about kind of accepting that, and whether you believe that we have a soul and we go off somewhere else and there's other like magical adventures afterwards, or if it's that the preciousness of getting quite deep quite quickly, but the preciousness of existing is just that, and only having this time here. I think yoga kind of covers both of those bases, or some kind of like spiritual or meditative practice. Because if at the basic level it's just, I can get an appreciation, I can slow down of being here, I can kind of be in my senses, but without being, I know they talk about attachment and stuff, but for me, the attachment thing is like without like the tension around it, I guess, and the attention that's created by thinking. And that sometimes that's fine. And that's part of it too. And certainly when you were saying about like the gurus, it feels like it's very easy. For me, it was very easy, like in my 20s, to be like, light is good, happiness is good, that's what we're aiming for, that kind of transcendence, everything is fine all the time. And we were talking a little bit about these things about gurus and other things you discussed about that. And like, I think when people are like really human and still show they're really human, even if they've kind of got some followers or they're there's like Pema Chodron, the Buddhist nun, and like Ram Dass obviously was a classic people that I used to like listen to on YouTube loads to be like, what's the answer? And I realised that it was actually, again, a bit like what theatre I liked and what I didn't. There's some gurus that seem to have had as many awakenings as other ones, but actually they seem a bit false, they seem more, and they're not having fun. Do you know what I mean? And they're not human and they're not humble and they're not there's a story about like Ram Dass normally had like a microphone like this, I think, or like a one like two or two above him sometimes. And then he came into a hall once, and this was at the height of people in America going, oh, this guy is like, he's been to India and he's like having this big thing. And he it was like a normal microphone, and he started getting all like a bit uppity about it and was like, excuse me, this. And then he laughed at himself, and for him he said, it was my guru coming back as a microphone to like punk me and to humble me a bit, and and whether that's his kind of his version of that. But I think that thing of like that like humor about it and going like, I've been so far down the spiritual path, and like I still get stuck in a traffic jam sometimes, and it's annoying, or still do that. I wasn't meaning you having driven me here today.
I drove him here today, so he's seen that in action.
Don't know how to out you. I am very centered, and I do love a good swear at someone if they're kind of doing some bad driving in front of me.
I have to say, I do.
Good for the practice, I guess. It's all part of the practice.
My favourite Ram Dass quote is, if you think you're enlightened, live with your parents for 1 week.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. It's so true, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I can definitely testify to that, because I had to go back at one point. So maybe this is a good point to go. So I searched a lot, and I ended up as part of it. What happened? In very quick succession, I got Lyme's disease. or I got bitten by a tick in Scotland, and then I found it on the plane I was going to Romania for a week with some friends to stay like in the middle of nowhere in Romania. And luckily I saw it just before we got on the plane, and they have deer, I think, or something in Romania, so they know how to treat it. But that really, like, after kind of years of like doing lots of spiritual stuff and sort of maybe having that tension of I'm going to be a great spiritual person and all this kind of stuff, then that happened, and you know, I was really like, I could die or I could live the rest of my life like being absolutely you know, just knackered and not able to do anything. And you know, it's really, really serious, and luckily it didn't happen like that. Got the like antibiotics when I was out there. But I remember just going through this weird sort of very up and down thing of like lying in a hammock and going, I accept in like the blue sky, and then going down and like screaming at the river just in like rage at how unfair it was and all lots of fear and stuff. And it kind of went a bit like back and forth like that for like a few days, and that thing of trying to be zen about it, and then just having a lot of feelings come up about that and about like, you know, my upbringing and all that kind of stuff. It was kind of really the moment of that. But then the foolish cliff jumping thing that we talked about, rather than going, I'll take the gentle river down, I went, well, there's only one way to deal with this. I'll go and do an ayahuasca ceremony. I'll go and do some plant medicine. Which I don't know how much to talk about really, but that was the very extreme. I've got to like nothing to lose now. Might as well. And I did like check in with myself, but it wasn't a snap decision. It was like try to check in with my body about it and like, does that feel like the right thing? And I was like, yes. And obviously I have to be kind of a bit careful talking about it, but it was in the UK, and it was with some people who had studied in South America with some shaman. And I actually think they did a lot of all of the things right. They did like a screening thing beforehand, that kind of thing. Jane's obviously seen me since, so maybe has some different opinions on that. But I think they did what they could up to a point of like not going, oh well, no thanks. And I was really like, no, I'm really like ready to do this. And my version of it is that the kind of idea is that you go in with like a mantra or a very simple thing where you go, I need to kind of like learn about or can you help me just overcome this one thing from my childhood, or I've always had this thing. And so of course for me it was like the end of the universe, so I was like, can you cure me of like all fear of death please, and also I'd like to be really compassionate. And it's kind of like you've got to be very careful with that kind of thing, whether you think it's because it's like a very powerful spiritual being, or whether you think it's because it's really potent methamphetamines and I don't think it caused it, but it triggered this kind of like 3-year journey of kind of, and it was just before lockdown as well. So, and I was talking to someone recently about it, and they said, wow, it must have been really difficult to open so much when the world was closing. Yeah. Like this. And this is a thing of the fool of like, you do the opposite of what culture does to kind of do a thing. So yeah, as the world was going, like this, I'd kind of had everything sort of like blown wide open. And like the first year I thought I was okay, but I was doing a lot of like really meditating, like really seriously and really hard, like for long periods, kind of every day and that kind of, and I was like, maybe this is what I'm meant to be doing for the world, you know, maybe everyone's gone into being a bit like a monk, like I've always had that kind of, you know, that thing of, if I'm searching, I might as well go and do that kind of stuff. And it seemed like a good opportunity for it. And it's very hard to say if it's right or wrong. Now, I always say, like, I'm certainly not a poster boy for doing that, you know, that kind of thing. Like, and in the end, for me, what happened was I sort of went into a very serious kind of cycle of psychosis, basically. I call it like the proper madness, or madness capital M. And I don't mean that to diminish other, but, you know, the one where people go, that's a bit, you know, uncomfortable. We can deal with depression and anxiety, but you're hearing voices and all that kind of thing. And yeah, I spoke to Jane a bit through all that. I kind of pulled in everything I could and it took a good kind of 2 years really properly. And it wasn't in all, but it was like months at a time. I'd just be out of it in fear, kind of like thinking I was hearing things, seeing things, kind of pacing up and down. Then I'd be fine for a bit. Then I'd kind of go back into that again. And I couldn't look after myself. So I did actually, ironically, when you're talking about the Ramdas, I know that's quite a deep story to come out with the Ramdas thing, but I did end up having to go and live back with my parents and I can tell you, certainly wasn't an enlightened guru in that state. I was like a baby again.
When I came to see you, do you remember your dad called me and I came to see you? Had you just left the Hare Krishnas then?
I think so.
And you were in a yurt in the garden.
Which sounds crazy.
But it seemed like probably the best thing, really, for you to have a bit of
so.
space.
And now, after it's all happened, I mean, to kind of cut a very long story, maybe reasonably short, there was kind of a lot of that going on. And there was a point that came where I was like, I'm never going to be okay again. Like, I'm either going to end up getting sectioned or institutionalized from life, or like, I just didn't know. And it was just like everything that I'd, and like gone on this big journey. And I kind of felt like I'd done it a bit of a weird way round, where like I'd done quite a lot of therapy in my 20s and gone spiritually searching and then had a massive crisis. So it was a bit of and I imagine it happens to some people, but you're normally like, oh, shouldn't the like massive like existential thing happen first? And then you sort of integrate a bit rather than sort of going on this whole journey. But I think it was just this thing of there was something in me that really, it was trying to do the right thing, or I was trying to do the right thing by it, but that searching going, I've got to know, or I've got to go right there. Would not recommend in terms of the spiritual thing, but there was something in me going that for you, this is your journey, and whether that's right or not, it certainly has taught me a lot. And then in August 2023, I'd kind of exhausted both my parents a bit, and they'd put me back in the suburb of Leeds where I grew up, just in a house on my own, paid for it. There was one flat that I was in for a bit, and that was very it wasn't great. I was there on my own. I was being seen by different people in the mental health team every day. And then I went to another flat, was still why is this? Why am I here? What, it's embarrassing. Lots of my friends were around. I was going to some of my best friends from high school, two of them were together, and they had me around for dinner every week on a Wednesday or something. They'd have me around for dinner and games. And I just couldn't enjoy anything. I was there hating everything, hating trees, hating them for being so kind, all that kind of stuff. And then one day in August, finally, I sort of went to bed with a voice going, "You are now the one that will destroy the whole universe." And I didn't really believe that. It was a weird mixture of it was just very loud, but it was it was the exact opposite of what I'd looked for. And I think it was just all my fears coming out of being the worry. It was probably a bit of that 7-year-old in psychological terms going, oh, I'm worried about that. What would be the worst thing to happen for me? It would be to go on this journey and then be the one that plunged everyone into that fear for the rest of eternity. And the theatrical coming out, and I can kind of laugh about that now. And I think even at the time I was like, I don't know if I believe that, but I was just so tired that I sort of went to bed and went, fine then, do your worst. And went to sleep, and it's a bit filmic. I'm kind of worried about how whether I woke up and there was a beautiful sunrise, and the world hadn't ended, and something in me just went, oh, that was a lie then, and it sort of cleared very quickly. Now in psychological terms that happens, it's a psychotic break where it just things get better very quickly again, and now I'm back in that kind of that position of very much not now walking around going, oh, and I saw the light, and now I'm I'm a guru and I'll get all these followers and whatever, and I still get so annoyed at things, and have been off work with stress recently and that kind of thing again. But it was a case of, I think I just felt so grateful, and it felt like something very deep had shifted in me to just go, you're okay, you're okay now, and on a practical level to then have been reasonably well since then. And there was a feeling in me of this isn't going to happen like this again. When I thought that I was never gonna, just enjoy a sunrise, or just enjoy the birds singing, or just enjoy friends happening again. And again, it's not, I would not recommend that. It was definitely the hard route, or the exchange. I would say to some people, it's if there, if it was something spiritual in me, it was oh, you're taking the kind of turbo fast track to learn about it all and make all the mistakes. But it has kind of done what I asked. I was saying to Jane in terms of feeling centered in myself and that kind of thing now. But the point is that the practices that really helped me, and certainly have helped me ground and integrate since then, have been the really simple, slightly playful, really grounding ones. And I sort of knew that. There was a part of me that knew that the whole time. And doing Jane's practices, doing this kind of clown training with Holly, which is the same stuff. It's all just about being receptive, coming into your senses, coming into your body, but also being kind to your mind and like embracing the humanness and sort of, and so in like the fooling training, it's like solo improvisation, and you bring out these characters and just welcome them all, even if they're like, oh yeah, screw you, I'm the best person on the road, I'm gonna run everyone off the road, that kind of thing. Or like, oh, I'm amazing, like, yeah, I'm a yogi, and that means I'm very enlightened, and just playing with it and having that playfulness about it. But it was always when I was doing those things, even before all of this happened, I was like, that's really what I'm looking for. But it's just so much simpler than I think the mind makes it. And I think there was just something maybe in my mind that was like, I really have to go there to like know after all of that was just thoughts, or that was just in my brain, and that whatever that core thing is, but which is very much here, right? For me, it does feel like it's in the center rather than all this. Yeah. And like the trips that you can go on, I think Ram Dass called it, the mental trips and the tricks and the things can be so great. And like, yeah, there's something in me that really went to that. But it took a village. It certainly took a village in terms of the people I had to call on to like make sure I didn't end up, either not here myself or like in some institution or whatever. But I do think the things, and I couldn't always do, like, I certainly, don't get me wrong, I wasn't doing my meditative breathing during that period of time. Yeah. It was enough to kind of relax a bit. But there was always a little voice sometimes going, even if you're hyperventilating, can you just like focus on your breath, or like, can you just breathe out a bit, or like, and then I'd have people come and go, can we just go on a walk? And I wasn't able to, and there was a bit of maybe a bit like a bad guru, but in my head, I had a bad guru in my head that was like, you must be present, with a stick there, and like that doesn't work. But a lot of the time, that's the kind of teaching we're brought up with, right? Is like, do this, don't do that, right and wrong, rather than the holistic stuff. But it was kind of, again, like, feels like when I say about being a fool in training, it's about like being always in training and trusting. And like for a lot of that period, I stopped trusting and was like, I have really messed up here. Like, it was all my fault. I've gone searching for this, and I've really got what I asked for in like a bad way or whatever. But it kind of came up with going, no, it's just like, you just went on that crazy journey and came back and went, oh, no, you don't need to do that. Like, and it was kind of like, go and do that and then tell other people, like, if I've got a big message to give, it's just, you don't need to, like, you don't need to do all that. And even a lot of the people in the circle that moved in that had like done that plant medicine thing or whatever, they were like, you don't like, it's not really for the Western mind, all that really strong stuff. And the people that, that's from the people that were kind of like in that circle with me. And they were doing it from the best of their things and the messages and whatever, but it was just like, we don't need it. That's not what we're looking. Certainly when we're all up in our heads anyway, like blasting your third eye open or whatever, might sound amazing to that like 20-year-old. Oh, I know everything, but that's like the gripping. Yeah. And I think the very basic thing for me is if it feels like this, even if it's an excited like tension of like, yeah, I'm going to learn everything and I'm going to be really enlightened, that's not it. Do you know what I mean? And if it's, just sitting down in a chair with a cup of tea, like that's more it. Do you know what I mean? In terms of the balance of like, yeah. This society. It's
been quite the journey, and I know that we sort of corresponded intermittently, didn't we? And I just remember, and I don't know where this was in the journey, but I think it was quite late on, that you were getting voices, and we texted, and we talked about the peaceful steadiness that's within. And I can always remember you sending me a message to say, I know that's who I am, but I've got to really fight to get back to this. Yeah. And then the next morning you messaged me and said, I think I'm getting there. And it was a constant, it was like that, wasn't it? Like really trying to kind of ride those waves and like you said, it barely be able to hold on to the practice or any of the practices, but to know that somehow they were there giving you an anchor.
And to be reminded of it, I think is the other thing. Yeah. And I think my main phrase that I probably said a lot during it was like, I know it, but I can't feel it. Yeah. And I think that's why embodied stuff, and when we're talking about any mental health, like that's obviously a massively extreme example, but I think for anything like that, and again, it's not to put down, talking therapies or like the things the NHS like to wheel out immediately, CBT, all that kind of thing. But I feel like when it's something that is also rooted in the body, and I'm sure, maybe you talked about this before, or like you'll have been in classes and teaching and learning with people that, have this philosophy. To me, it just seems like, again, that really simple common sense. It doesn't have to be, there's this great spiritual aspect. There's that element if you want it, but just being like, we're in a body, and mental health really affects the body quite strongly lots of the time, if not most of the time, and it's all about chemicals. And so surely something that can combine, or doesn't even see a difference between mind and body. It's just all, part of the system, I think, is important. And I didn't know that, and I didn't believe that. So it wasn't a kind of faith of, but I can really like feel it there. I just kind of had to remember, I think sometimes, that I'd felt it before. But then it was interesting that like the thing that really helped in the end was sort of like, and I obviously want to be very careful about this, was like, for me, was not letting the voices win, but just like being like, well, whatever then, and for me that was quite lucky, because they weren't sort of telling me to harm myself or to like harm other people. A lot of the time I did have those voices, but there was something in me, I think when you're talking about that safety, there was something in me going, I'm not going to let that happen. And that felt really important, to be able to like let myself be a bit wild and a bit whatever, because it felt like there was something holding me even when it felt really scary in that. And I wonder if, because there could have been, and I'm certainly not saying, you should just let whatever voices in your head overwhelm you, but I think the point is, it's something about like acceptance, maybe, because it was accepting like the voice, or it was accepting that was my situation.
And there's an awareness here. You were watching over your thoughts. Yeah. And there was a part of you that was being discerning. Yeah. That was your skill. There was an awareness of all of those intrusive thoughts. That part of you, that skill of awareness, was going, I'm just being a bit discerning about that one versus this one, and that one versus that one.
And I think the scary thing was, I didn't feel rooted in that. So I felt like maybe that was sometimes the watcher that was stuck, and like it was very much very dissociative. But it felt like that one was like, I guess looking back on it now, although I couldn't have kind of noticed that at the time, there were like the limits, if that makes sense. There were the like, this far but no further, if that kind of makes sense. And I do think that, that it must have come from some kind of knowledge of that. And then when things did clear and when it all happened, it kind of fell away very quickly. I do think that's because I had previously had that training of the neurology of all the yoga stuff and therapy. Like I talked about it like it was like a computer rebooting, and like it had got really clogged with different viruses and programs and that kind of thing. And then it had kind of reset, but not to like, me being a kid or whatever, but reset to, actually you had trained your neural pathways to do some quite healthy things. Yeah. That then went away for a bit, but actually there is like a baseline there. And I don't think, unless I'd done a lot of various different embodied practices and that kind of thing. But I think, there is something about simplicity, because I was talking to a lot of other people as well, because I was desperate at the time, and that was fine. But, I'll try this, it's not working. I'll try this, it's not working. I'll try this, and it's not working. And I think when you're in any of that kind of place of like suffering, and on it, and suffering is suffering for me. It's not like I had the worst suffering or whatever. It's like, if people are feeling disconnected from themselves, that always feels horrible as a human to experience. And yes, acceptance is one thing, but also it's not a nice place to stay in, in that place. And I think there's a difference. It felt to me like a very big difference between being accepting that like we sometimes get angry and we sometimes get sad from, like you say, that place of, but knowing that I have this kind of core part of me, or this, this awareness in me, and just completely letting emotions overrun and do other. So it's tricky. We were saying earlier, it's tricky to talk about these things in words, in that kind of way. So it certainly wasn't about going, I'll just let the voice overrun me and do absolutely everything they say. But you're right. There was a knowing. There was a knowing of just, I don't think this is true, you know. And it helped in some ways that it was so dramatic. Like, I've found voices more insidious that are just a little bit like, oh, you know, oh, that wasn't very good, was it? Do you know? Because that's easier to go, oh yeah, I believe that, you know, or for it to sound like yourself or your family or whatever. With it just being a thought, like, I think, there was something in the end, even though it obviously caused me a lot of problems for a long time, in the end it going, you will be the one to, you know, I was like, this sounds too much like a Doctor Who baddie, you know. But yeah, the difference, I guess, between the fact that I can sit here now and say that and me not being able to, whatever that might have meant, I think is having had those tools to be in me. But again, I think the problem when you're in that place is it's quiet. Like that place in you is quiet. It's quite calm. And so when there's lots of other stuff going on, it's hard to like feel it or I think you can also sometimes be in it without knowing you're in it, right? Because there's other stuff going on.
Exactly. It goes back to that thing that I don't know which module it was on when I talked about who is speaking and who is listening.
Yeah.
That when we have those voices, those insidious voices, the thing that we tend to do is we hear the voice and we think it, like you say, it sounds like me, or it sounds like it must be true. But actually, if you ask the question, actually, who is saying that? Where has that voice come from? And then say, but who is listening? Because who is listening is that unchanging, steady, peaceful place at your centre. The witnessing self, whatever you want to call it, the one that knows, or however you want to say it. And obviously it sounds like you said that's the discerning part of you, the aware part of you, kept resurfacing, I suppose, if you like, or just, you know, and it's, I mean, it's hard, isn't it, to know as well, because each individual brain, each individual nervous system, each individual's history, each individual's experiences all come together to determine, well, what is, if each of us were in that situation, depending on what our wiring is, what our, you know, blueprint is, then what the result would be. You know, it's fascinating, but also really scary as well.
Yeah. And I think there's a humility in it, as there is with anything this kind of thing, where I didn't feel like I did anything actively in the end, you know, to change that. At the time, I could look back and go, well, the choices I made to like do yoga and that kind of thing, but it's not like, oh, I did, you know, you just have to do this and this, and that makes you immune to everything forever. And like, it was kind of quite practical things of like support and like love, but in its very everyday sense. You know, it was love conquering fear, but it wasn't some big Hollywood movie, apart from the point where I woke up and it was a really nice sunrise. But it was just like the love of my mum, who even when I was like, I hate you all the time, you know, would just stick by me and that kind of thing. And I think the thing that yoga, and certainly like trauma-informed or therapeutic yoga, gives you is just strength. You know, you often talk about this. It's just strengthening that part of you. That doesn't mean you become invincible. It's not like a Marvel superhero of like, oh, I've got my armor on and it doesn't touch me. But, you know, to be able to, you know, and for mum as well, like she doesn't do so much yoga, but she's done meditation things. She does a lot of yoga now. And like, I think anything that can help you if you're in any kind of situation like that, you know, if you've got your son like yelling at you going like, you've always done terribly, and all the worst things that you could say to a parent, really, you know, there's obviously that like motherly, fierce, like mama wolf energy, I like to call it, of like, well, I'm not going to leave you. But I think for other situations that can be triggering in any way, having that sense of self and that sense of solidity, and we need to the point is that we need to practice it, because it's not naturally in our culture, I wouldn't say, and I don't think it's kind of radical to say that necessarily. Probably people, oh, I've heard that, but just on a very like, on a very simple level, I guess, there are other cultures in the past in human history that have taught this kind of stuff, or just haven't had to teach it because it's been ingrained in the way that communities work and the way that people are brought up and the way that families work, and that's just not what we've got now. And so that means without, you know, a few people trying to overhaul the whole system, there has to be something that brings that ability, I guess, or like...
Exactly. So based on your experience and all your experience of obviously the system that exists and everything. I know you have sort of a dream, or you have ideas about where you'd like to sort of create support for people.
Yeah.
And, you know, and look at sort of multidisciplinary and bringing things together. So could you tell us about that?
Yeah, and it's not necessarily, I think it's come from, it's again, that kind of like, in some ways, quite classic narrative of I've been through a hard thing and I would want to use those experiences to sort of, for good, I guess, in the world, or at least for some kind of learning. And, you know, yeah, again, I think it's not, oh, I've come through all this and I've got all these amazing experiences to share. But actually it took a lot of very skilled and highly trained people a lot of time. And the NHS was a part of that. You know, I did see mental health people and whatever, and I think I just went, but my experience being so extreme, I don't know if that alone would be enough, if that makes sense. And so having the yoga, kind of having done this like playful kind of more embodied practice, when we're talking about the voice in the head, I kind of did a bit of IFS therapy as well, which is like parts work. And I know that's a slightly kind of separate thing, but for me, because the model there is we have different parts of us, and they're not always the truth, but they all have different needs, and they're all in us, and they're kind of conflicting inner voices. And there's a self. It's called self with a capital of S in that frame of working, and that feels like that yogic self. It isn't any different. And I think when you start looking at all those, a lot of different practices, they have like a similar kind of core part of them, but then having like the sort of different flavors of them, I guess, would addresses like them being for different people. Yeah. And I've kind of been lucky enough to meet a lot of people that kind of have had that spiritual or that embodied element or both of kind of yoga and that kind of thing, but have some kind of grounding in the medical as well, you know, just so, you know, you have studied yoga therapy with someone who is also a doctor, right? And that's, you know, and Anne comes from a very kind of like strong lineage of like yogi families, and that I think the balance is like really interesting and really important. There's other people that I've done things with that have like been GPs and also like guide people through different spiritual experiences and that kind of thing, using a variety of tools. And we were talking earlier about this idea of bothness, you know, and the thing that going on any kind of spiritual journey or even going through any difficult, it's quite tricky to hold as humans, certainly for the brain. I think the body's a lot better at it. Maybe some of the more feminine qualities are better at holding like two opposing things at once. So, you know, yes, I am, you know, I have this core calm part of my center, and I'm really annoyed that it's raining because I wanted to go for a walk in the park, you know, and trying to have those two parts of duality at the same time, if that makes sense. So it's more about the and rather than, we should only get, you know, people to go to yogis for, you know, for their things. But I think it feels to me like when a lot of problems, I guess, a lot of suffering that happens at the moment certainly is about disconnection, whether that's from each other or nature or whether or your sense of self. It needs to have practices that are about that, as well as, you know, tackling the symptoms of it that would really help. So it's kind of a question for me at the moment, rather than being like, I've got a grand plan. I just know like being fortunate enough to like learn about these practices from people like you who do it really groundedly. Do you know what I mean? And it's not offering miracles necessarily, but I don't know, you know, and again, from my experience, that's what my brain thought it needed. But what it actually needed was safety, basically. And that's not, it's not, safety doesn't feel very sexy, does it? Or it doesn't feel very, whatever you want to call it, very alluring, or, you know, I don't mean in that way, but like, it doesn't sell. It doesn't sell. It's not very glamorous,
constant
I guess.
Conversations, isn't it, Sophie, about the stuff that...
But I do believe it's actually what a lot of people, well, again, is what I believe, and also from my experiences, like, what you like, that search is actually about, actually that sense of stillness just to enjoy what I've got now, or to be able to really be there for a friend that's going through something tricky and not have to make it okay for them because I can't sit with their feelings and that kind of thing. And I did have that as part of my search. I wanted that to do that and like, you know, but like, I don't think you have to go through so much suffering to feel that sense of safety. You'll be like, you know, if I find that in myself, actually it does make it easier just for me to kind of navigate life, if that makes sense. So I'm interested in, I know there are some people talking about doing more like trauma-informed medical practice. So for like doctors training, teaching them in that, people that are trained with like Gabor Mate in thing, and his whole thing is kind of basically a lot of trauma comes from, a lot of physical and physiological problems do come from emotional things, and that idea of there not being a difference, and often it is from being a young child. And again, maybe it not being extreme in like there's something terrible has happened, you know, from someone else, you know, in that way of kind of like the, you know, the horrible stories that you hear, but just a case of being a 7-year-old and questioning mortality, you know, that can be traumatic if it's not, if there doesn't feel like a sense of safety to like deal with that, and then that can ripple out into, you know, into all the things that we see a lot of adults doing. But I think one of the kind of best thoughts that like popped into my head when I was about 18 is, oh, everyone is mad, like most people are, but that's not true of all humans, you know what I mean? You see, I certainly still see other, you know, other cultures that have a bit more kind of ritual or some kind of connectedness in them. But I think it's the bothness, right? So it's not like, oh, we have to burn it all down and start again, but can we bring that into into where we are now, even in small ways? And that's certainly what I found from being in your classes that you're doing. And actually those small ways aren't, I remember on that first India retreat, I think you joked about it being like yoga for old people. Or like, you know, or like people said that. And then we did the practice and everyone was like breathing a lot and like whatever. And you were like, now tell me it's yoga for old people. Because it's deep. It's deep. I think that it feels like it accesses something really deep when you do things gently and simply in a different way to organs.
Exactly. So it's been quite a journey.
I feel like I talk loads, sorry.
No, that's why you're here. That's why you're here. So I mean, we might have you on again when you start your practices. Anything, Sophie, you want to wrap up with on that?
Thank you for sharing your story. And I think I was mainly sat here thinking that it must be been quite the challenge to articulate such a felt sense of a journey, to then intellectualize it and have to give it to somebody new. In this case, me, because I'd never heard your story before. I think you did an amazing job at articulating a period of your life that was, of course, incredibly challenging, but as you've said, has given you certain gifts and lessons and blessings as well at the same time. I think one thing that I was thinking about throughout the whole time that you were speaking is that idea that, trauma isn't the bad thing that happens to us, it's the response around us, and that, as children, kids are going through stuff that is beyond their control, and there's no response and support there around them in order for them to just express themselves and it be met by an elder or just by somebody else to be able to hold space for that. And, you know, Jane always reminds us of Shanti Shanti, that which is beyond our control. And when you said, you know, as a 7-year-old, it was like, oh, and then the universe is going to explode. And it's like, if you'd have just had something there that allowed you to understand that which is beyond your control, and then that which is in your control. And even if that could have just been held, it makes you wonder how that would have wired your nervous system. But I think it's a brilliant metaphor for life, that we're all getting stuck in that mentality of that which is beyond our control, and we don't understand that which is in our control, our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own behaviours, showing up in the world in the way that we want to make those positive changes and be activists in our communities, but then also knowing where that boundary stops. And I just think that, if everybody had that container, it's a bit like when you go bowling and they've got them little things that pop up. Honestly, when you
still have those barriers.
Good. Yeah,
my friend goes bowling every year for his birthday, and
and I was just thinking about them.
Rails.
I was like, we all just need those little
keep popping up
and just guiding us so that we don't go out and wider and get more anxious and more overwhelmed. And I think that's such a human experience. So, thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Yeah. So obviously, if you're listening to this and you've got, any sort of questions or anything that you want to ask Robbie or us, or you want to share something, we'd love to hear. Obviously, this sort of series that we've done on based on sort of stress science and so on might bring up things and might, be illuminating actually as well for some people. But yeah, so thanks again, Robbie. It's great having you as a student. I have to say, you are an utter inspiration. I love chatting to you about theatre and all things camp and crazy, as well as the deeper stuff. Yeah. And like we said, that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's about being real, but we can still have the deep stuff and we can have the fun stuff as well.
Yeah.
So would you like to end? Do you have a parting thing to say before we go?
I don't know, really. When you were saying about... putting it in words, I guess that's why the embodied stuff is really good about it. So maybe I'll do a dance show about it.
I was going to say you could do an interpretive dance, but obviously we don't have the space in here.
It might not capture all the subtleties about it.
No, exactly.
But yeah, and if other people are searching, and there's obviously, if are in a very kind of confused place, please do reach out. That's always the kind of first and best thing is like, yoga's like, it might be a practice to do with you, but I think it's important that it happens in community. So.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, thanks, Robbie.
Inside Out, a yoga therapy podcast, is hosted by Jane Cragg and Sophie Coggins. To leave comments, ask questions and interact with the show, follow Yoga Therapy Podcast on Instagram. Please also subscribe, rate and leave comments wherever you listen to help the show reach more people. This podcast is recorded at QPod Studios in Oldham and produced by me, Matt Dean, with video production from Eddie Corteen for QPod Productions. For more information, visit kupod.co.uk.